go outside in New York City and literally thousands of people would crowd around. I would have to, sometimes they had to lock me into, I had to run me in. It was ridiculous.
In a scant 16 years, Tom Green has gone from hosting a cable TV show in Ottawa to international fame as a gross-out comic on MTV and in movies. He also married and divorced a movie star, and he successfully beat testicular cancer, and he isn't even 40. We met him on the streets of Ottawa's Byward Market, where he used to film the segments for the program that started it all.
So, Tom, you know when you order a burger in a fast food joint and you want everything on it, and the waitress yells out to the guy in the kitchen, drag it through the garden?
Yeah.
You know that phrase?
No, I never heard that before.
All right, well, there it is. Drag it through the garden.
Order a burger in a restaurant.
You want everything on it. Drag it through the garden.
Wow, I like that.
That's what we're going to do with you now.
Okay.
We're going to drag you through the garden.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Sorry? All right. So,
good.
When you wrote your autobiography at the age of 32?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that? Okay. You wrote, and I'm going to toss a quote at you, you wrote, "Before I could catch a breath, I had a hit TV show, starred in 4 movies, wrote, directed, and produced one of them, got testicular cancer, got married to a movie star, got divorced from a movie star, had a house burned down, and went from media darling to media punching bag."
Yeah. And back again now.
And back again.
Got to rewrite the book.
I know. You have to rewrite the book.
Everything's going great.
So let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because we're standing here in the Byward Market in Ottawa, which is where, back then in the early 90s, you did a lot of the stuff on the Rogers TV show that you had at the time.
Yeah.
But prior to that, you were doing music, you were doing a radio show at the University of Ottawa, you were doing a whole bunch of other stuff before you started doing that. Talk to me a little bit about that part of your life, the early part of your life.
Yeah, been doing broadcasting here in Ottawa, independent broadcasting, community broadcasting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it started out, I was doing the organized rhyme, right? The rap group Organized Rhyme was really the first sort of glimpse of, and Yuk Yuk's as well. Yuk Yuk's, when I was 15 years old, that was really the first sort of step into sort of the world of seeing professional entertainers in Ottawa. I'd go down to Yuk Yuk's, Howie Wagman's still there running Yuk Yuk's, let me on stage, and I was, doing stand-up there 2 or 3 times a week in high school for about 3 years.
But tell me about that. See, this is what I don't. This is the part that, from my own personal experience, it completely eludes me. You're 15 and you think, I want to go down there, and all I want to do is be up there on that stage, saying funny stuff.
Yeah.
Where did that come from in you? Do you have any idea where that came from in you?
Yeah, well, sure, yeah, I think I do. I mean, it was, certainly I was definitely a hyperactive kid. I liked getting laughs at school. I knew I liked the feeling of getting a laugh at school. You know, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, moved to all the different army bases. You know, before we stopped in Ottawa, I was living in CFB Petawawa and St. John's in Quebec, and St. Jean and St. Hubert, and all over. Moved every year for about 7 years. So you'd be the new kid in class. You'd sort of have to act out and get attention and stuff like that. But and then I loved comedy too. You know, I loved comedy. So I loved watching Monty Python's Flying Circus on TV every night, and loved staying up and watching David Letterman's, Late Night with David Letterman, and SCTV and all that stuff, Saturday Night Live, all these shows. So, you know, I knew that comedy was something that I wanted to do. Heard about Yuk Yuk's, went down there as a fan. Initially, we went down just to watch the show. Then we started going down there to heckle because we so craved the attention. We wanted the attention so much. And now I see this every day on tour. There's these kids like me that usually, there's certain people that go to the club because they want to have the attention, right? So they'll sit in the front row and they'll heckle you or talk to you, right?
Yeah.
And so that was me. We did that. We'd come up with kind of creative ways of heckling the comic. Like we'd sit there with our hands like this, me and my 3 friends, and then every time we tell a punchline, we'd all switch our hands like that, you know, and then he'd be looking at us right there.
So it was almost like you were trying to be part of the act.
Trying to be part of the act.
Yeah.
And then we got kicked out, and then I think
wait, back up. Tell me about that, getting kicked out. How he kicked you out?
Yeah, well, there's a bouncer there named Tibor.
Okay.
And he basically, we got bounced. You know, that was kind of the thing. You know, if you were making too much of a disturbance, you know, usually you'll get kicked out of the club. And so that was us.
So why would they let you back after you being so pain in the ass like that?
Well, the thing that's funny about it is, like, while we were getting kicked out, we were kind of joking around with Tibor, you know, the bouncer. We kind of messing with him, and it was funny. He was all kind of good-natured, joking around and stuff. And then we found out about the amateur night, I think probably that night, because we sort of heard about that. And the way it would work is you'd call and you'd leave a message on a voice, on the answering machine.
Yeah.
And, you know, say you want to come down for amateur night. We left a message. They didn't see us. They didn't know who we were, right? And so they called back, and how we called back. And, okay, yeah, you guys can come down. We got a spot open for you. And we showed up, and then they recognized us, and then they said that we couldn't go on stage. And then Tibor told Howie that, you know, those guys were kind of funny when I was kicking them out last week. And so they let us on, and it was cool. I had a really good first set. I remember it was...
What was your material?
I remember I was talking about cereal commercials and cartoons and television shows.
And you're 15?
Yeah, I was 15, yeah. And then the local Orleans newspaper did a story on me a few weeks later. Maybe about 6 months later, actually. I got right into it right away. A lot of the local comedians really kind of were really cool. There was a cool sort of vibe down there. They had a sort of a comedy workshop on Saturdays. You'd go in, and the headliners would come in and meet with any amateur night guys that wanted to talk to the headliners.
And they give you tips?
Yeah. So Harland Williams would come in, who was like, you know, my favorite, Norm Macdonald. Those were my two favorite guys. And Harland would always come in and give us tips and stuff. Actually, thinking about that now, it's funny because I've become really good friends with Harland, and we hang out together all the time. We talk all the time. But back then, I was 15 years old. He'd come in, he'd have a fur coat on, you know, like a fake fur coat. And I remember I said to him once after one of his shows, I said, "Harland, can I take you out for a submarine sandwich?" And he said, "Sure." And I took him over to the Fat Albert's around the corner, and I bought him a submarine sandwich. And I remember laughing. I remember it was so funny because he still does this now. He ordered his Coca-Cola, and he got his Coca-Cola, and he slurped it like this. So that was funny. I enjoyed that. But anyways, Howie let us on. We had a good time, and I did that for about 3 or 4 years. So
but tell me about you, because...
I remember the local Orleans paper, the Orleans Star, did a story about it. Denis Grignon, you might know him.
I do know Denis Grignon, yes.
Yeah, he was a writer there. He did a story. Yeah, he worked at CBC.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he did a story about me, and all the comics called me Little Tommy Green from down the street. That's what they called me. It was fun. It was really cool. But it was a very supportive environment. It was really great.
See, by the time that I met you, which would have been about 94 or so, just when you were starting to do the show on Rogers, your style, and that's what caught my attention when I turned on your first show and went, okay, this is interesting.
You kept me on the air.
But it was different. I mean, it was what you were doing. What it sounds like what you were doing when you were at Yuk Yuk's doing the stand-up was sort of a more traditional kind of thing.
Yeah.
And by the time you were doing the thing at Rogers, it had morphed into the stuff that you're now known for.
Yeah.
Where did that transition take place in between there? Did you realize that you needed a style of your own? You needed something that you had to pursue that was different from what else was out there?
I think like when I was a kid, it's very intimidating being on stage in a comedy club, especially when you're 15 years old. You know, it's really in front of a bunch of drunken college students or University of Ottawa students, right? And Carleton U students. And you're sort of 15 years old. You haven't had sex yet. You know, you're trying to make jokes and entertain a bunch of amped up, 20-somethings. And, you know, so I actually was always very intimidated, even though I did it for a long time. And what happened was, I was in that group, Organized Rhyme, at the exact same time. We were in high school. I was making music. We were playing around town. We were playing at Barrymore's and Zaphod's and all these different clubs around town, opening up for local punk bands and things like this. And we got an opportunity to go to New York City when I was 17 years old and record for a summer.
Yeah.
And it kind of lined right up with this show that Yuk Yuk's had booked me at to go do in Montreal, and I had to cancel that gig, and I was just so kind of, because I went to New York and I kind of made a decision, I'm going to go do the rap thing, and I went and did that, sort of stopped doing stand-up at that point, and...
Did you think at that point that music was going to be the direction you were going to go in?
Well, I was just a lot more comfortable doing it, you know, and it was, how's it going, man?
Like that wasn't going to happen.
Come to my show tomorrow night at the Center Point Theater. Bring all your friends. It's going to be fun. Stand-up comedy show. It's going to be good. I guarantee it.
My girlfriend goes from by.
Guarantee. Yeah, come. It's a benefit too for a good cause. So come down there.
For what cause?
It's for a friend of mine who was paralyzed in an accident this year. So a local guy playing hockey. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to be here.
Those could have been people that you harassed in the market 15 years ago, for all you know.
Yeah. They're harassing me, right? Oh, that's
or
cool.
whatever.
Nice. Hopefully they come to the show.
Hopefully.
She's not harassing me.
Easy now.
Not at all.
Easy boy.
But no, so like yeah, so I went, and it was, you know, the thing about doing the rap music was it was completely, you know, I was thinking about this now. There was no rules.
Yeah.
Okay, rap music was like a brand new thing, really. You know, and at that time I was listening to groups that no one in my school had heard of, making music with electronic, you know, samplers and drum machines and all this stuff was completely new. I built a little studio at home, and so there was just sort of something that was really just kind of like really punk rock about it, and I really liked that sort of lack of any sort of structure.
Yeah.
And
and it was that and skateboarding. Those two things seem to be very linked, right?
Yeah,
Do you?
absolutely. Yeah. Skateboarding was like that too. Really, kind of, there's no structure, there's no rules. You kind of can create anything you want.
Right.
And so we went to New York. We did this thing. We recorded this little demo. This guy who we met here in Ottawa, who brought us down to record with his brother, you know, who lived down there. We were going to try to get us a record deal. They thought we could rap really good, you know, for a bunch of goofy kids from Ottawa, but that didn't end up panning out. Came back to Ottawa, but now we had a lot more confidence because we spent the summer in New York City.
Yeah.
I remember we actually snuck into the David Letterman studios. We got up onto the floor level, and then realized we were probably going to get arrested, so we got out of there, and then we went and waited in line at like 5 in the morning and got standby tickets, and I went and saw Letterman too that summer, which was amazing. So it was sort of still very much in my mind, you know. I saw Letterman. So. And
you wrote about that too. You wrote about watching him come out to warm up the audience, and walking away, and then literally turning around and coming back out as the host.
Yeah,
and how that impressed you.
I remember specifically some of the jokes he said, not exactly the word for word, but he came out and was talking to somebody about what kind of shampoo they used or something like that in the audience, and then he went back, and then he came back out, and in his monologue he started talking about cream rinse for no reason, and everyone was just laughing because they knew that he was referring to something that he'd said to them off camera, which was a cool trick.
It's smooth. Yeah. That's got to make an impression.
Yeah, it was cool. But yeah, so came back here, and
you were doing U of O radio. Were you still doing it then, or you done that? You'd done that. Was that okay?
We got a record deal then.
Ah, okay.
We got a record deal, a real record deal, with Ivan Barry, who's a music producer and still doing this in Toronto, and produced the Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
We drove to Halifax to open for the Dream Warriors. How are you? Drove to Halifax to open for the Dream Warriors. I brought all these demo tapes I'd recorded. I gave them to Ivan Barry. He essentially signed us to a record deal immediately, and we got a deal with A&M Records. And we then, the next 2 years, we pretty much were playing shows with the Bare Naked Ladies and playing on Much Music live.
You spent, I want to sort of fast forward a little bit, because you spent almost a year living in your parents' basement. After all of this, what would appear to the normal human being to be success. I'm sure it did. You were in your parents' basement. Waiting to see if something was going to happen in television. This is after you'd done the Rogers show and all this stuff.
It was more than a year, but you're talking about the year that I waited after we did the pilot.
Yeah, you did a pilot, and then nothing.
Yeah.
You just sat there, and you'd already had this experience. You'd already been signed to a record contract. So you'd kind of had a taste of stuff.
Did the show in Rogers for 4 years.
Yeah,
after that point,
and then suddenly, zip.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was kind of a good welcome to show business moment. You know, I mean, hurry up and wait. You know, wait for someone to make a decision. Wait for somebody to say yes to something. You know, this is what it's all about. You know, and you sort of, you know, you realize that, you know, things don't just sort of, people don't instantly hand you TV shows. You know, so we were really lucky, you know, in a sense, because we did do that pilot, and you know, Alan Pressman at CBC Ottawa gave us that opportunity to do that pilot, and we did it, and it was actually a really good episode of the show, and we brought in Joe Flaherty, and he was a guest on the show, and we'd done the show for 4 years on Rogers. We'd gotten a lot of support from yourself and from people at the Ottawa Citizen, and we've done stories about the show. We created all these portfolios and all these packages of our show. It included your piece that you did on the show,
okay,
and
all right.
brought it to CBC, and you know that was something that I really think that I kind of got good at.
Yeah.
They taught us that at Algonquin, you know, how to pitch yourself, how to make a treatment. We called it a treatment.
There you go. Yeah.
How to make a treatment, right?
They didn't tell you how to sit around and wait, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we did all this stuff, put it all together, and then we went to CBC, and then we got the pilot, and then we were sure we were gonna make it here. This was gonna be the big break, and then they passed on the pilot. But then immediately, pretty much after that, the Canadian Comedy Network first year came along, and they picked up the show, and that was my first sort of job.
So you do this thing on the Comedy Network, and it's like professional TV.
Yeah, well, you know,
or at least what you thought was professional TV.
Well, you know, we were still kind of doing it in conjunction with Rogers, because we used the Rogers truck. We went and we got a budget. We went and rented out the Arts Court Theatre. We built a set in there. We were still doing it, you know, raw. And we drove across Canada in a van that we borrowed off a kid that we met on the internet. You know, I know that sounds creepy.
Some poor kid that you abandoned somewhere along the way,
That's right?
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Nice work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We said, we'll let you lend us your van, and we'll let you come with us as far as North Bay, I think it was. But then we got to put you on a bus and send you home because we don't want you with us for the whole time. What's up, man? Good, how you doing? But, so anyway, so he was a cool kid. I'm still in touch with him online. He watches the web show. I'm going to be seeing him actually probably in Toronto.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, that's good. Because I thought maybe you just put this kid in the bus and that was the end of him.
Yeah, no.
You mean, didn't even know whether he made it back home or not?
It was pretty funny. I remember when we dropped him on the bus and he took off, we kind of waved, and then as the bus ran around the corner, we kind of pretended to sort of do this sort of little happy dance or something, but yeah, it was kind of an asshole thing to do, actually. Nice van, Ford Econoline van.
All right.
But,
okay, so this, and it's about this time, and this is there are two words I have to say to you, and then you're going to have to elaborate, okay? So, all right. Dead animals.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because we're driving on a road trip, right? And we don't have a real prop budget, and we're looking for something weird to film. And you sort of think to yourself, okay, this is going to be a really great idea. It's actually part of the reason we had to get out of, and we wanted to get on a road trip because we've been shooting here for 5 years, just right around here, walking around the Barrymore market every day, like a loop. Like, and this is where the people are. This is where all the people are in Ottawa. Back then, it was even more so. You know, this was a place where there was people to go talk to and, you know, do jokes with and improvise and kind of get reactions from. And so sort of street theater, we were doing really kind of needed reaction shots, and there's a lot of characters down here in the Byward Market. So, you know, we after about 5 years, everybody was onto us. You know, I mean, we couldn't go. You know, everybody would see us coming, and they'd be like, "Okay, yeah, there you are with the meat taped to your head again. Cool, how you doing? Funny, real funny." You know, so you know, then we went and terrorized Elgin Street for a while, and then then we went and got kicked out of Bayshore, then we tried to get into the malls, and then we were done here in Ottawa. So.
They want us to go. We're not allowed to videotape, so let's go now. I know that you've stopped videotaping.
Where is there a restaurant where I can get a chocolate milkshake around here?
Right down there, sir.
They don't have chocolate milkshakes anymore here. I just bought these condoms, and I was wondering if I could return them because I don't think they worked properly.
So we thought we'll go on a drive, go to hit small towns where no one knows us. But I don't think we really accounted for like the 16-hour stretches between, you know, Thunder Bay and Winnipeg, you know, the 3-day stretches of nothingness. So, you know, you'd be sitting there, you know, we're getting stressed out. We got to film something, just driving through trees, seeing nothing, and then there'd be like a dead moose or something at the side of the road.
Oh, a dead moose.
That was actually out in BC.
Yeah.
It was just between Whistler and Prince George. We're driving along. I was sleeping actually in the back of the van. It was 6 in the morning. We'd been driving all night because we wanted to get to Prince George, I think is where we were headed. And all of a sudden I get woken up. There's a dead moose. Get out. Do something with it, right? And so I jumped out and started, you know, I thought, okay, we'll try to resuscitate it. That'll be funny. So we'll try to resuscitate it. And people were driving by. What are you doing? And construction worker came by. What are you doing? Oh, we're trying to resuscitate it. And that led to me just sort of, you know, giving it a little hump.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Maybe we can revive it. Come on, here.
We gotta go.
Oh, I'm gonna hump it like this, and you give it milk to mouth, okay? Come on! Come on!
you know, because you need to do something kind of weird, right? I mean, I was fully clothed, you know. It wasn't gross or anything like that. It was just sort of.
It wasn't gross or anything like that. What are you, nuts?
That particular one. It wasn't.
Oh,
gross.
okay.
It was a big moose. It was kind of interesting to me personally because it's a moose. You know, wow, that's pretty cool. How often do you get to go up and just kind of pet a moose? And it was fresh, you know, so it wasn't like it was rotting or anything like that. So anyways, but it was to get the reaction shot. You know, people come up and they look at you and you're like, we're trying to revive it, you know, and I'm on the stage.
Yes.
Guy's looking at you and you get the shot of the guy with a weird look in his face, and that's the joke, right?
Yes.
You know, I mean.
But no, now let me stop you right there and ask you about that, because frankly, in a lot of the stuff that you did after that, that's what it's all about. And you talk about that in the book that you wrote. You talked about that. You talked about quoting John Cleese when you were trying to explain your philosophy of comedy to some guys in Hollywood about the joke is not what you're doing, it's what
someone acting silly. It's funnier when you're looking at someone at someone acting silly or something like that.
And you're conscious of that stuff as you're doing it.
Oh yeah, it was very, very, very much, very, very, very constructed. You know, I mean, we would have our camera people. We would have several different camera people we worked with for a while, and then eventually we found guys that knew, like, because I'd go in the market here and I'd be doing something ridiculous, right? You know, with meat on my head or thrashing around on the ground, making a fool of myself or whatever. But the whole point was to have it be the old lady off to the side going like, you know, what the hell's wrong with this, you know, and she'd be over here, right? And we'd have one camera, and you know, often we go with the camera guy and he'd be pointing it at me, right? And all the comedy was happening right over here.
Yes.
Right? I'm just trying to make the people freak out. So then we get good. We get a guy who would know to always go over, get that, and go get that, and get that, and then I'd just go in the edit room and I'd cut it back and forth between the action and the reaction and all this kind of stuff.
See, I think this is really interesting because the people who really don't like your stuff, I don't think understand that that's what you were trying to do at the time.
They don't understand at all. Yeah, they don't understand at all. But those people that don't understand what I'm doing, those are the people that are standing over there.
Yes.
That's them. They're the confused, bewildered person, and they're just looking at what's going on there. They don't really understand that they, even as a home audience viewer, are kind of the punchline at some point.
Right.
And you know, that's one thing I did, and that's something that I'm doing a lot less of now. You know, it was something when you're young and you're kind of trying to take on the world. You kind of like want to make a point that you know, look at these conservative kind of jerks. They don't get anything. But now it's and that's something that a lot of comedians do and have done in the past, and it's something that I do sometimes as well still. But I do less of it now because, you know, it's sort of like. I've done it already. You know, I've done it. I want to try something else now.
Yeah.
But that's what we were doing, and that's.
But you sort of get to. I mean, I guess part of the burden, if it's a burden for you, is that you've been tagged with that now for so long. The humping the dead moose and all that, and the dead raccoon, all that sort of stuff.
No, it's not at all.
It's not a burden.
No, I mean, the fact of the matter is like I just went and toured Australia, and this tour was sold out all across the country with thousands of people coming to every show. You know, paying to come see me because they love that stuff.
Yes.
Now, I mean, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't even be able to go on tour. I wouldn't even be able to do stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be able to do this. So it's, you know, I have there's a huge audience of people that get it, that love it, and those are the people that I'm happy to call my audience. And they come to my website. It's made that very successful. We've now got a very successful podcast that we just launched last week. You know, so you know, there's always going to be people that don't like what you do, whatever you do.
Sure.
You can, if I'd gone and done something really conservative and straight, then all the kids that like my stuff would have hated that. You know, so you can't please everybody all the time. That's the thing.
All right,
so.
we're freezing our asses off out here. So let's stop. And finish this because there's a whole other part of your life that we have to talk about, and I think we should probably do it in the place inside and in the place where you started at Yuk Yuk's.
Yeah, that'd be
Should
great.
we do that?
Okay.
All right, let's do that. Okay, cool. Let's go.
This year, Tom went on a worldwide stand-up comedy tour, the first time he's done stand-up since he was 15, here at Ottawa's Yuk Yuk's Comedy Club. So I want to talk to you now about, now that we're out of the cold, I want to talk to you about the Hollywood experience.
Sure, yeah.
And in your book, again, I'm going to
Excuse me if I plead the fifth about certain
Oh, I understand
topics.
that you're going to. It's okay. Those are probably topics I'm not going to ask you about anyway.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But you wrote in your book, and I thought this was interesting, on your first trip out to L.A., I guess you're going to L.A. to pitch to MTV, the show. And you wrote in the book, I sat in the shower at the Mondrian Hotel for 4 hours before the pitch, literally in the fetal position in the bathtub, with the shower blowing in my face. The only time I've ever done that before or after was about 6 months later, right before I was a guest on the David Letterman show for the first time.
I remember it.
You were really freaked out by what you had to do down there?
Yeah, and I think as I get older, I realize that I actually sort of had a certain amount of anxiety that really was a real thing, that was probably something that is maybe not everybody has, you know. Like I would literally just get completely nervous, and because it meant so much to me, you know. I was just like, this is the most important thing that I've ever had to do. I have to get them to pick this up. This is the shot, right? This is the big shot. You know, we'd worked for 7 years to make this show, or however many years it was, 5 years, however long time. When you're younger, that 5 years seems like a lifetime, you know. You know, and it was all about this one pitch. And we'd been given a couple of videos that we were allowed to play to them, and the way they had it was they wanted us to walk out of the House of Blues, in this room at the House of Blues that they'd set up in front of all the executives. And I was going to play them a couple of videos and tell them about myself and explain why it was funny and what it is that I did. And so I did that, but then I actually slipped in a couple of extra videos that I wasn't supposed to play. One in particular was the sucking milk out of the cow's udder.
Time to milk the cows. I'm the police officer. It's time to milk. It's time to milk. It's time to milk the cows. I'm a police officer, and it's time to milk the cows. It's milking time. It's milking time. Milking time. It's milking time.
I slipped that in at the end, which, you know, completely grossed everyone out, but freaked them out. But they were sort of covering their heads and laughing, which is sort of the intention, because they couldn't believe that I actually played that. But the other big thing that I remember that was really funny was I brought when I got my show in Rogers, we sent them our treatment, right? I told you about it. We sent them our treatment, and I sent everybody at Rogers Cable, the executives at Rogers Cable, I sent them a pineapple with our treatment, with a picture of me pinned into the pineapple. And that sort of, people would, you know, basically the idea was the executive would come in, they go, why is there a pineapple on my desk? You know, and oh, okay, well, there's this thing with it, and then they read it, right? So that worked. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to do something to get their attention. So I put some shaving cream and in a bag, because I was into covering myself in shaving cream a lot back then. We'd done this bit where I went on Calgary's local news when we were in Canada, because we were on the Comedy Network driving across Canada, and they'd invited us into CTV to be on the local news, and I jumped up on the desk in live television and covered myself with shaving cream and freaked out the news anchors. And
What's that?
I've got to wrap it up. Thank you
Why?
so
How
much
come?
for being
What do
here.
you mean?
Well, because we're out of time.
What are you talking about?
Tom Green on the Comedy Channel.
Friday.
Gotta
Tell
check-
them what time it's on. It's on Fridays at midnight here, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Tell them, because we want to tell the people what time it's on.
Fridays at midnight.
Yeah.
Don't miss
we want
it.
to tell
I'm
the
just
people
going to
what time
clean
it's
up
on.
and then I'll get back to the rest of the
Wait,
news.
okay, wait. Can I flip through here? Shuffle the papers at the end. You know how they do that?
Yeah.
You know
How they do it.
Yeah, you know how they do it?
That would
like
be
at the
me.
end, like they take them on. Okay, we'll be right back
to
in
the
a minute.
CFTN News at 5 and 6. Here's a look at last night's winning lottery numbers.
An American man goes head-to-head with a Canadian man in a record-breaking roller coaster ride. The ups and downs.
you know, they still talk about it when I go to Calgary.
I'm sure they
you know,
do.
They're sort of still freaked out by it a little bit, because it was weird. You know, you're not supposed to do that when you're on the local news, when you're invited on the local news. Well, this was sort of a similar thing. You're not supposed to play a video of yourself sucking milk out of a cow's udder. You're not supposed to. At the end of the video, at the end of the pitch, where I told them all this stuff, I pulled the shaving cream out and I covered myself in shaving cream and started thrashing around on the boardroom table in front of everybody, just like convulsions, and took the shaving cream and rubbed it on a couple of the executives, sort of lightly on their heads, and I was sort of screaming, "I want to be on MTV," And it turns out I actually rubbed some shaving cream on Brian Graydon, the head executive who ran the whole place. But everybody was just so sort of, I guess, you know, they'd been in there looking at pitches all day. This was so it worked. But yeah, before I went over there, you know, I knew I was going to do this stupid stunt, and you know, you're never sure if that's the right idea. You know, if that's a good idea. And so I was kind of, you know, I kind of visualize how I'm going to do it, what I'm going to do, and just kind of. So I just, I got so stressed out. I got in the shower and I just sat there like this on the bathtub, and just like
it's just, you know, and somebody coming in on you right then would think, all right, just send them away.
Yeah. I was just kind of trying to cool off, but you know, and the same thing before I went on Letterman for the first time. That was probably the first time I was a guest on Letterman, and when Letterman asked me to host his show, which happened after I wrote that book, but were the most frantic, freaked out moments of my life. I think I've gotten a lot more. I think doing stand-up this year has actually really helped me with that, because now I'm used to sort of getting rid of that nervous energy, releasing that nervous energy many times a week.
And you have to keep at it. And if you keep at it, it does ultimately get easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not 100% easier, but sometimes it does. Yeah. What I think was interesting about the MTV experience and the way you described it was that you went from doing this show that was basically unstructured and your own idea and your own bosses, and even at the Comedy Network here in Canada you had control, but the MTV thing, they basically turned you into a meat puppet at the beginning, didn't they? They were telling you what to do, and you were just the guy.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I mean, and I say this all the time, you know, I'm really thankful to MTV I'm really thankful that MTV saw what I did, picked it up, put me on the air, pumped it out there to the entire world. It's still they just started playing the MTV show again in Latin America. So 3 weeks ago, it's playing all over South America right now. I'm getting Twitters from Chile and Mexico and Brazil and all, you know. So that's a very exciting thing, you know. And they're still you know, very much supporting me in that way. But it was sort of again, it was this moment where I knew we had 10 shows, and I knew that we had to make them crazy so that people would pay attention. Just like I wanted to cover myself in shaving cream or suck the milk of the cows that are in the pitch meeting. Now we had to actually get it on the air. Right. And that was not easy, because we had shot hundreds and hundreds of pieces in Canada. And this is why they initially picked us up, because we had so much material already. And we put cards on the wall of every little bit we'd ever done. And then they would start to, you know, these are the executives, the television executives, who are people who I know today, you know. But at the time, we were working together daily, and they were taking these cards, and they would say, this is your first show. And they'd sort of take the softest stuff. You know, they'd pick one of the things that was pretty funny, but then they'd take a bunch of other stuff that actually I wasn't even proud of. It was stuff that we'd sort of, you know, done one afternoon walking down Elgin Street.
Tame stuff, pretty much?
Just, you know, sometimes you hit, and sometimes it's just kind of okay, you know, and that's the nature of making that show, is improv, walking down the street, making it up as you go along. And then some of the stuff was just, you know, stuff that was just, you know, we knew, we'd already played it in front of audiences. People already had told us what their favorite stuff was. Their favorite stuff was the crazy stuff, the slutmobile, the falling down on crutches, the sucking the milk out of the cow's udder, the humping the dead moose, you know, all the stuff that people would look at and go, what the hell are you doing? You know, because they'd never seen anything like that on TV before. Because, you know, keep in mind, this was, you know, I think someone came up to me about this recently and actually, you know, said something that I've sort of started to realize is, you look at it now and it's, you know, some of it's still obviously strange stuff, but at the time it was just completely off the deep end, you know. Now people have seen Fear Factor. They've seen people chewing up rats on NBC. They've seen Jackass. They've seen all this crazy stuff. Then there'd been nothing like that. People, they just could not fathom putting this stuff on TV. So I would have these arguments, and they would go and have these meetings in boardrooms, and they'd lock the door, and I'm at the office, my new office in New York at Paramount Plaza, you know, where they actually shot the Jerry Lawler show, or the Jerry Lawford show, the King of Comedy, you know, was actually in that building. And you know, here now I have an office in this building, you know, where supposedly you know, that character in The King of Comedy was based, and it was just surreal, you know. But then I wasn't being allowed into some of the meetings where they decided what clips, so I'd have to go in and argue, and I'd get on the phone with my manager, and he would call them, and it would be a big argument.
And you got reamed out by some executive once because you went off the teleprompter, right? You weren't reading from the teleprompter.
Yeah, we went off the teleprompter because they'd had these comedy writers come in who were good guys, but you know, they were just basically writing what they were told to write, and it was very sort of tame stuff, or stuff that just wasn't really that different. You know, we were trying to be different. So I would I wanted to improvise. I wanted to do stuff that was, you know, I wanted to goof off in the studio. And the first episode, I would go off the prompter, and then the executive from MTV would come in over the speaker and say, you know, Tom, you know, do the prompter, and it would embarrass me. He would embarrass me in front of the audience. Yeah. Now I felt like I've lost the audience. I'm sitting there embarrassed. So you know, they'd have a big meeting, and the executive would come in. He'd say, Tom, everybody, you're not in Canada anymore, man. This is MTV, and you're going to do what we say, literally. And it was very aggressive. Or we're going to send you back. And it was soon. Nothing had aired yet. You know, we're putting these 10 shows together, and we're just thinking like, well, okay, what's the decision? Is, you know, the other big thing was editing. And I was thinking about this after we talked on the street, about when you talked about how people didn't necessarily understand the sort of straight and zany, the kind of person looking at the person being silly. You know, that whole fact that there was somebody standing there looking at me writhing around on the ground. And I was thinking about how, you know, maybe somebody might look at that and not get it. You know, let's say someone like Rex Murphy, okay? He might look at that and write an article, scathing article about me, right, saying that I'm just an idiot.
And
right?
he would.
Yeah, but he didn't necessarily understand that I was sitting in an editing room myself for hundreds of hours, cutting this together, cutting to the guy, cutting to me, cutting to the guy, looking at me, finding the part of the video where I look like the biggest idiot I can possibly find, finding the part of the shot where the guy's looking at me like he's looking at the biggest idiot he's ever seen, putting it all together, and the amount of work that went into that, and the amount of having to go to school and learn how to do all this stuff. I think sometimes people just kind of, it was like, oh, this is just some guy running around being an idiot. And so that was kind of when we got on MTV, we had all these videos, and I'd thought about them all very, very scientifically. You know, like this shot of this, I would know when I'd be going around on the ground doing something silly, and then we'd cut to this shot of this old lady looking at me, or falling on the crutches, walking on crutches in Vancouver.
It's embarrassing, that's all. I'm embarrassed. Yeah. No. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. Oh!
Falling down. And then it would cut to the shot of the old lady looking like, oh, is this guy all right? And MTV would go in, or not MTV, this particular couple of executives would go in, and they'd say, oh, we can't have any old ladies on the show. We can only have people under the age of 35 on MTV, so we have to cut that out. I'm like, don't you understand? We're making fun of old people here. Kids like that, you know. We're making fun of the old lady, and that's why people are going to laugh because we're taking the piss out of the status quo. So that was the argument. It went on and on and on. Eventually, you know, they'd take something out, I'd put it back in. I'd go in the edit room and put it back in. The editor would be like, okay, he'd put it back in. Then they'd send it to the executive. The executive would send it out. They'd take it out, put it back in, take it out. And then showtime would come, and I'd have about like 3/4 of what I actually wanted in. Because in fairness to them, they obviously got it. They got it.
Ultimately, they got it.
They got it. They got the big picture. Yeah. You know, we're putting they took out a Rolling Stone magazine article, a full-page ad in Rolling Stone before the show aired of me humping a dead moose, picture of me humping a dead moose. I mean, they got it. They understood this was about stupidity and getting a reaction and being crazy. But they did, you know, when it got down to the fine points of editing it shot for shot, I was very protective of it. I'd created this, it was like sort of a piece of, you know, work that I'd worked on. And they'd go in and change it, and it was very stressful for me. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah, no kidding.
The thing that happened that was funny was then the show started airing, and it exploded instantly. I mean, like nothing, I think, that's really happened to me, certainly, you know, that kind of from here to here instantly. And
they were running the show constantly, almost, right?
And I
mean,
think
it was almost like it was your
they
channel.
were very surprised. They were running it constantly. Back then, MTV didn't have a lot of programming. So there was like 4 original shows. There was The Real World, there was Road Rules, there was my show, there was Celebrity Deathmatch, and that's it. And then they play those shows 5 times a day. So my show would play in a block from noon till 6 o'clock. It would be my show, back to back, every episode that we shot, those 10 episodes. They played them over and over and over. So if you went to MTV, it was sort of like, it was pretty much my channel for about 6 months. But the first few months of that, you know, were insane, and I couldn't walk down the streets of New York. I couldn't leave. I would go out. It would be literally. I would go outside in New York City, and literally thousands of people would crowd around. I would have to. Sometimes we had to lock. They had to lock me into. I had to run me in. It was ridiculous. It was
Well,
like
you talked about exhausting Ottawa. I thought it was amazing because you exhausted New York City.
Yeah,
you had to get out of there
in about 6 months
because you couldn't shoot anymore.
Yeah, it was. So we started going out to New Jersey, and that we'd be in traffic all day. Half the shooting was sitting in traffic, getting out to Long Island, or, you know, getting out of the city, but just because where it was less congested with people, but yeah. So then the bits started airing, and the ones that anyways, it all worked out in the end. I really think, you know, I'm not even really complaining about it or anything now. I just think it's kind of a funny story.
Yes,
You're asking
it's
about
an
it.
astonishing
It's an interesting story. It's like, this is what happened, you know. And, you know, I sometimes think, you know, well, you know, like, I kind of, like, sort of showed them something, right, that was, you know, I think I sort of made them realize that this kind of stuff worked. And, you know, they've taken the ball and run with it.
I want to ask you now, you talked about stress.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, and whatever parts of this that you don't want to talk about, that's fine. But there was, after this, a time when I thought, having read your book and knowing you from before, I was astonished that you got through some of the stuff that you got through. Your relationship with Drew Barrymore started, and your cancer appeared, and you were involved in a motion picture all at the same time, while all of this stuff was still, that you just talked about, was still bubbling under the surface.
Yeah.
That you made it through all of that stuff in one piece, I think, is just astonishing. So talk a little bit about what that was like. I mean, I know very often, not very often, in fact, almost 100% of the time, when any reference is made to your marriage, it's always referred to as your brief marriage to Drew Barrymore. But as you've pointed out, you were together for 2.5 years, you guys. There was a relationship that was
we lived
serious
together
relationship
for 2.5
there.
years, and we had a good relationship for a long time. But, you know, it was a lot of stuff piled on top of that. It wasn't just that, it was, you know, I had cancer, so that was pretty crazy, you know, getting testicular cancer right when that happened, let alone, you know, doing the movie and having to deal with, you know, something that I really didn't even really write about in my book, that you know, is that, you know, you're suddenly sort of, the world changes, you know. 1 second you're this sort of goofball kid on Rogers Cable trying to make, you know, a crazy show, and nobody's really taking it that seriously. I mean, people think it's funny, but they're like, okay, kid, you know, funny. And the next second, you know, everybody's kind of just talking to you differently, you know, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. You know, people are treating you differently. You know, and that's sort of, you don't necessarily know how to process all that.
Well, somebody told you that not only would your life change, but your relationships with your friends would change, and that turned out to be the case.
Your friends look at you differently. You know, you're sort of in a different kind of, you know, people. You know, and also I got sick, so I was in the hospital. I was getting, you know, cut open from here to here. You know, it's not just simple to take the testicle out. That was the easy part, but then the lymph node dissection was a really excruciatingly painful thing, and a very long recovery that I'm still actually dealing with to a certain extent. You know, where you're cut open and you're split apart like a fish, right? So, you know, that was, you know, we made a show about it and we had some laughs with it, but at the same time it was sort of like a real mind-warping experience. But you know, I think I talk about this in my stand-up comedy show, and I've been, you know, it's been a very cathartic thing to be going around the world. You know, I don't get into detail about any negative stuff, but I do talk about having cancer, and I make some jokes about it, and just sort of being able to talk about it. Doing the show was helpful, and now doing the stand-up, it's a good thing.
Did it change your approach? I mean, the fact that you're suddenly confronted with your own mortality at a young age, did it change your approach to your comedy in some visceral way, do you think?
Yeah, that combined with everything else, I think, did, for sure. And I'm not sure really where one thing starts and the other thing stops, you know. Definitely, you know, you look at life differently, you're happy to be here, you know that your body is a fragile thing, that we're basically all ticking time bombs, that at any moment you can wake up and your heart can explode, or your, you know, testicle could have something growing on it and you could die, right? So that's kind of interesting to suddenly know that as a fact. It's not just something.
It's not intellectual anymore.
Yeah, it's not just something that like, oh, it'll never happen to me. You know, it's, you know, this happens. And on top of that, you're also kind of like, now instantly I have to approach comedy differently, because it's one thing when you're the goofy kid and everyone's going, look at that goofy kid going crazy. It's another thing when all of a sudden you're living in Hollywood, you're on the David Letterman show. You know, there's almost sort of a different way of approaching getting a laugh, because you're starting out here. So you can't necessarily come in and be brah, because then people are going to say, look at this guy, he's in fucking, look at this Hollywood jerk.
So do you start second-guessing your own comedy instincts then at that point?
Well, not initially, not instantly, right? And then you're sort of like you know your things are going so fast. All of a sudden you're hosting Saturday Night Live. All of a sudden you're on Letterman. All of a sudden you're on Leno, and you think, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on Leno, and I'm going to wrap myself in a deer carcass, and I'm going to go, it'll be hilarious, just like it was before. But people aren't necessarily looking at it exactly the same way. So you know it happens so fast. So then you know it's kind of nice to. Now, the last few years, I've been doing my web show. I've had some time to think. I'm a little bit older. I can process all this information, and I can write some jokes, and I can go and test it around the world, and really kind of come at things differently from a different angle. You know, and I'm actually really kind of realizing the more I tour around. Am I talking too much? I'm realizing as I tour around that you know it's kind of fun being sort of you know. I'm kind of more comfortable where I am now, and sort of the, you know, doing a show out of my living room, sort of back in that kind of, you know, clawing my way, you know, underdog kind of position. That's more relatable, I think, to people. It's more relatable to me, you know, and I think it's definitely something that you have to analyze though and understand.
You know, you're not the first guy in comedy that I've talked to over the years who's found themselves going back to their roots, stand-up as their roots, more or less, and finding that engagement on a regular basis with an audience to be sort of revivifying, you know, the kind of that it...
Because you're there, there's people, these are people. I'm playing in Cleveland, I'm playing in Pittsburgh, I'm playing in Atlanta, I'm playing in Nashville. You know, I'm going to London, England, I'm going to New York, but I'm going to Minnesota. We're playing in Ottawa tonight, Belleville tomorrow night, Hamilton. These are people, real people, you know, that are working. They're out, you know, they're not in Hollywood. They're not surrounded by all this, you know, bullshit, you know. They're real people, and they're the people, they're their audience, and this is people that you want to entertain, and you're there every night, and you get an instant reaction, and you know when it doesn't work, and you know when you say something that's kind of lame. And my show's evolved over this last year. You know, the beginning of the year, I was up there on stage, and I was more aggressive. I was kind of doing this sort of ranting about the world, railing about the sort of angry, mad at the world kind of thing, which is the tone of, which is the theme of a lot of the comedy. But it's evolved and it's become more positive. And I'm even saying some of the same jokes, but doing it sort of in a sillier way, in a fun way, because people come out, they want to have a fun time. You sort of sense, okay, this works, this material works, this joke works, do this, take this out, lose this, do this, and yeah, you're on the road 200 days a year. You start to really get a sense of what people, as an audience, collectively laugh at. So it's been really exciting for me.
I want to ask you about your wedding, but I want to ask you about your wedding just because of the way you describe it in the book, because I thought it was astonishing. A minute ago you talked about the people that you're playing to and some of these things were not Hollywood people, but your wedding was the perfect picture, it seemed to me, of the real world, and that would be your parents and your family and all the people you brought down to Canada and the other people who showed up. And there was the good, the bad, and the ugly at your wedding. And I think the ugly would probably be Courtney Love, and the good would be Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about just the stories surrounding that whole...
Well, you know, and I'll say, Ken, I would only do this for you.
Okay.
Okay?
I appreciate it.
Because I don't talk about this. I wrote this book for a reason. I never want to talk about it.
All right.
And but you know, I will say that it was an interesting wedding. And Adam Sandler was a great guy, and he stayed till the end of the night.
Amazing.
He was dancing with my friends and family who came down from Canada, and were sort of wide-eyed and couldn't believe that they were in Los Angeles and Malibu, having witnessed this sort of crazy thing. But you know, it's you know. That's all I really want to say about it. I don't want to be on camera.
My sense, okay, I understand it. My sense, though, was that you began.
Courtney Love was funny too, by the way.
Was she?
She was, you know, she's a creative person, you know, and she was heckling.
Yeah.
She was heckling my dad as he gave the speech. But I think it was somewhat fitting in a way, because it was just so bizarre and warped, the whole situation in hindsight, that this was actually even going on. I mean, it wasn't really, but. You know, it was the fact that Courtney Love was heckling my dad and my friends at my own wedding was actually kind of humorous, and I was laughing at the time. It was annoying, but I didn't get mad because it was ridiculous. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the internet thing and your show, and because I've watched a lot of it over the last couple of years, though I can never quite figure out when it's actually live or when I'm watching something that isn't live but was done earlier. Can't quite figure that part out yet.
Yeah.
But you are unrestricted by the constraints that the rest of us have in television, in that it can start and finish whenever you want it to, and it can last as long as you want it to. What's the longest you've ever done? When you've
4.5 hours with Steve-O from Jackass.
Right. And what were you doing?
Drinking. Lots of drinking. Taking phone calls.
And you were hammered by the time it was done.
Taking phone calls and drinking and having a good time. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. You know, and it was a fun show, and Steve-O's an awesome guest, and he's come up many times. He's quit drinking. I haven't quit drinking. I never really felt like I had to quit drinking, but I've slowed down on drinking. I don't really like drinking and performing anymore. Yeah. I think the web show, you know, the first year of doing the web show was fun because, hey, we can drink. And I've experimented with that before. I've always loved that. Steve Allen did that.
Yes, he did.
He did a bit where he brought on a alcohol, you know, a drinking and driving sort of thing.
He wanted to see how far he could go before he got drunk.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a parody of it on WKRP in Cincinnati. I went on with Johnny Fever. I went on the Tonight Show and brought out the J Bar, and let's see, you know, how many shots of the J Bar I could do, and got, you know, hammered, and it was crazy. And then all of a sudden I have my own TV studio, and it's like the Tonight Show, right? Where you can drink like back in the 60s, like they used to do in TV, and the guests and I can have a beer, and every once in a while, you know, when Steve-O or somebody who liked to tie a few on would come up, it would maybe get a little bit out of control, and that was fine. I think that was some great, ridiculous, outrageous stuff that I'm really kind of. You know, I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but you know,
because that'd be 4.5 hours of your life you'll never get back.
Yeah. You know, I did it once, but it was funny. It was experimental and all. But now, you know, I don't ever. You know, I like to study about the stuff, about comedy and everything. I read a lot about it. You know, I read this amazing book, Steve Martin's book that came out, Born Standing Up, and he talks about how, you know, he never drinks before he goes on. So he used to have a glass of wine or two and then go on stage, and he'd listen to his tapes back, and he'd hear himself slurring, and after that point. And it's very true, you know. I really very rarely have a drink before I go on stage. Sometimes the late show Saturday night, if somebody passes me a beer while I'm on stage, after I'm halfway through my set, I'll have a beer with the audience. But it really does change the whole act. Your timing, everything changes. So. And it's been healthy for me. Stand-up comedy has been healthy for me. You know, you'd think, oh, you're in bars every night. That must be pretty. You must be getting wasted and partying too much. But actually, because I'm so worried about it, I've actually gotten to this point where, you know, I'm in the bar every night not drinking. You know, so.
And you're more disciplined in a lot of ways by being on the road like this. You have to be, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't last. You'd burn out.
You have to get up at 6 in the morning every day and do radio interviews and let people know you're in town. And it's a very long schedule. You know, you're in airports all the time, getting up for early morning flights, and so if you're hungover, it's just not a fun life, you know.
Where do you see your comedy going? I mean, it's, you know, what we've talked about so far is that there has been an evolution in your material, and there has been an evolution just over the period of time you've been doing the stand-up tour. But as you get older, do you see your style of comedic material change the way it has for a lot of other guys who've done this before you?
Yeah, well, the thing that I'm really enjoying about doing this tour and doing stand-up is you're talking about stuff. You're talking about real things, issues. You're talking about things that people are dealing with. You can go anywhere with it. It's not just being silly. It's not just being absurd and getting a reaction. It's also talking about things that are happening in the world. And you know, as I get older, I sort of have different opinions about things. You know, and you can have a lot of fun with that. So I enjoy that. I'm enjoying talking a lot about technology right now. I'm enjoying talking a lot about, you know, the changing face of our society, with everybody on their phones all the time, with everybody on Facebook, with marriages being affected negatively by Facebook and all this kind of stuff. All leads to like really funny stuff. And also, you know, outside of that though, outside of the stand-up itself, you know, I'm really excited about just the internet and the ability to be independent and broadcast to the world. Yeah. I mean, if that was possible when I was in high school, I would have never left the house.
Yes, you'd still be down there.
If I could sit there on my computer and have kids in Sweden see what I was doing, I would have probably exploded or something like that. My brain would have just exploded. So, you know, I feel like it's an exciting time because I have all this sort of, you know, understanding of how to put it all together. I have all these ideas, and now we can do it. And so I'm, you know, I'm really excited and enthusiastic about, you know, learning to create and build this new kind of business model for broadcasting. I just want to kind of independently forge some sort of little, tiny little, crazy little internet company for myself. And I think that's going to be the new world of broadcasting. There's going to be all these fragmented little broadcasters who, you know, you don't need millions and millions of dollars a week to produce a television show when you've only got 2 or 3 employees, you know, and you can do just as much stuff with 2 or 3 employees now as you could do with 50 or 60 employees 10 years ago. And so that's the whole thing that's changing, and the industry's changing, and, you know, people are not sure where it's going to go. And, you know, I don't need to have 100 million viewers worldwide. I'd be happy if I had a couple million. We have a couple million now. We have 4 or 5 million now worldwide, you know. And I'd be happy if I can figure out a way to keep giving them stuff. They can keep coming back to TomGreen.com, watching whatever we're doing. That's what I want to do. So that's what we're going to do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with it.
Thanks.
And thanks a lot for taking all this time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. And it's always been awesome seeing you. And
you too.
Thanks for that initial interview back in the Rogers Cable, my 4th episode. You came on the show. And,
yes.
My mom
if I'm
said,
ever in Los Angeles, maybe I'll pop into your...
My mom says hi.
Oh, good.
Talking about the old Metropolitan Life days the other day.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing it, Tom.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.